Hi, I'm Marisol, and I guess this is the story of how I finally saw the truth, not just about him, but about everyone. My fiancé threw $5 on a $150 dinner bill, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "That's your price." I laughed it off, in front of everyone, but inside, something cracked, because my sister had already warned me not to ruin his image. And my dad? He said nothing. That night, I realized I wasn't just being humiliated by one man. I was being sold off by my whole family. What they didn't know, someone else was watching, and he didn't see a cheap woman, he saw the truth. So, before I share how everything changed, tell me, have you ever been treated like a price tag? Friday evening in downtown Chicago had that polished buzz to it, the kind that made you feel like life was about to deliver something big. I had spent most of the afternoon getting ready, curling my hair the way Dorian liked, slipping into the navy blue dress he once said made me look less like someone's little sister. That should have stung then, but tonight I clung to it like a compliment. I told myself it meant he noticed, that he cared. He texted, "Big surprise dinner tonight, wear something classy." So I did. I even borrowed Mom's pearl earrings. As I stepped into the restaurant, the kind of place where the menus didn't show prices, and the staff wore gloves just to pour water, I felt hopeful. Nervous, but hopeful. Dorian was already seated, slick hair, tailored suit, phone in hand. He didn't stand when I arrived, just waved me over like I was a colleague, not his fiancé. "You're late," he said, not even looking up. It was 7:03. I forced a smile and sat down, smoothing the fabric of my dress under the table. "This place," he said, glancing around, "makes the others I've taken you to look like fast food." I laughed lightly, the way I was trained to. Small, polite, don't make things awkward. That was how we were raised, right? Keep it together, don't embarrass yourself, and above all, don't embarrass the man you're with. The waiter came. Dorian ordered a bottle of red that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Then truffle risotto, Wagyu steak, some fancy appetizer I couldn't even pronounce. He didn't ask what I wanted, just handed the menu back with a wave, as if my choices didn't matter. "You good with steak, right?" he asked afterward, not waiting for my answer. I nodded. Because what was I supposed to say? I wasn't here to argue over dinner. I wanted tonight to be good. Maybe this was his way of showing me he was serious. Maybe this was the beginning of something real. But as the meal went on, he barely looked at me. He was too busy scrolling through emails, muttering about a client who couldn't read contracts if they were tattooed on their forehead. He snapped at the waiter twice. Once, because his wine glass was slightly wet. I shrunk in my seat. "Smile more," he said at one point, not even looking up. It wasn't until the check came that everything fell apart. The server placed it quietly, with the same elegance he brought every other plate. Dorian glanced at the total, smirked, and pulled out his wallet. I leaned in, trying to get a sense of what he was thinking. Maybe he'd make some kind of toast, a soft gesture, a real moment. Instead, he pulled out a $5 bill, just one, crisp, folded in half. He tossed it onto the tray like it was a poker chip. "That's for you," he said, loud enough for the table next to us to hear. Then he leaned close to me. His breath smelled like wine and ego. $5. That's your whole price tag." I froze. I didn't even blink. It was like someone had just cut the music in a crowded room, and all I could hear was my own heartbeat echoing in my head. Was he joking? My stomach turned. My hands started to sweat. I looked around, desperate to see if anyone else had caught what he said, praying that maybe I misunderstood him. But he was smiling. That smug, condescending smile I'd seen him give strangers he thought were beneath him. $5. My worth in his eyes. I wanted to speak, wanted to scream, throw the wine in his face, stand up and walk out with my head high. But I couldn't move. Not yet. Something in me, the part that still wanted to believe in the fairy tale, held me in place. I felt the heat rise from my chest to my cheeks. I could hear the hum of nearby conversations, the clink of glasses, and somewhere a woman laughing too loudly. All of it pressed against my skull. I stared at that bill on the tray, my vision blurring, and then I felt it. A gaze. Someone watching me. I looked up, slowly, afraid I'd see pity in a stranger's eyes. But the man across the room wasn't looking away. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't whispering to his dinner date or pretending he hadn't seen. He was just watching. Still. Calm. Like he saw everything. Not just what happened, but everything. And that was the moment I realized I wasn't invisible after all. The man's eyes didn't waver, and somehow that quiet, steady gaze held me more firmly than Dorian's voice ever had. I glanced down, then back up, half expecting him to look away. He didn't. There was no smirk, no pity, no half-hearted attempt to pretend he hadn't seen what just happened. Just a stillness, a presence, the kind that made you feel seen. I barely noticed Dorian speaking again until I heard the sharp edge in his voice. "Well," he muttered, pushing his chair back slightly, "if I'd known $5 could buy that much silence, I'd have used it sooner." I blinked. The words hit like cold water. Around us, the room shifted. People were watching now, more than a few. I caught the glance of a woman at the next table, her lips tightening, eyes darting back and forth between me and Dorian. Her husband leaned in and whispered something to her. She didn't answer. Dorian leaned toward me again, this time louder, like he wanted others to hear. "You should be grateful, Mari. Cheap dates don't usually get a place like this. Most girls like you don't get anything but leftovers." The air got heavier. My throat burned, but I didn't speak. Not yet. I was afraid of what might come out if I opened my mouth. Sobs, rage, maybe even laughter. I sat still, trying to hold on to the last shred of composure I had. He reached for his wine glass and took a long sip like it was just another Friday night. Then he checked his phone. I should have left. I wanted to. My legs itched under the table, screaming at me to stand up and walk out. But I couldn't. My whole body had gone rigid. My mind was racing, but my limbs refused to listen. It was like I had gone into some kind of emotional paralysis. And then, movement. I caught it out of the corner of my eye. The man from across the room stood up. He didn't hurry. He didn't storm over or make a scene. He simply walked with purpose toward the host's stand. There, he spoke to someone, quietly, briefly, and gestured subtly in our direction. The server nodded. Moments later, that same server approached our table again, this time not with a tray, but with a receipt. He placed it gently in front of Dorian. "Your bill has been taken care of, sir," he said, with a calm professionalism that almost sounded rehearsed. Dorian frowned. "What do you mean? I didn't pay anything." "No, sir," the server replied. "A guest has covered it. Everything's been settled." Dorian looked around, confused, then irritated. "Which guest?" "I'm afraid they requested anonymity." Dorian scoffed, then turned to me like I had something to do with it. "Did you text someone? Is this some weird pity stunt?" I shook my head. That's when I saw him again. The man, now returning to his seat. He caught my eye once more, gave a small, respectful nod, then picked up his water glass. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about making a scene. It was about restoring something that had been ripped from me. Dorian stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You know what? Have fun with your little charity moment." He snatched his coat off the back of the chair and walked out, just like that. No apology, no second glance. Just a trail of entitlement in his wake. For a second, I thought everyone would keep staring, that I'd be left there under a spotlight of judgment. But instead, the air shifted again. This time, it softened. A man 2 tables down gave me a small smile. The woman who'd looked uncomfortable before now offered a nod of quiet solidarity. And me? I sat still, not because I was frozen this time, but because something in me had finally stilled. The server returned to clear the dishes. He hesitated slightly, then leaned in and whispered, "He shouldn't have said those things." I looked up. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. As I gathered my things, slowly, deliberately, I glanced once more toward the man across the room. He was watching, yes, but not intrusively, just present, like someone who'd seen too many people treated as disposable and decided not to look away this time. I stepped toward the exit, not quite sure what to do next. The door was only a few feet away when I heard a voice, low, even, calm. "No one should ever treat you that way." I turned. He was there, closer now, not smiling, not expecting anything, just stating a fact like it was the simplest truth in the world. And when he said those words, I felt something shift inside me, something I didn't know I was still capable of. He didn't wait for a response, just turned, took a few calm steps toward the door, and disappeared into the city night. His words hung in the air long after he left. No one should ever treat you that way. I stood there for another moment, coat folded over my arm, purse gripped tightly in my hand. A strange warmth spread through me, confusing, unfamiliar. It wasn't pride or hope, it was something deeper. The quiet thrum of a heart remembering it used to beat for something more than survival. The cold outside hit me as I left the restaurant, but I barely noticed it. The city was alive as usual, cars rushing by, people laughing from patios, sirens humming in the distance. But inside me, everything had gone still. I walked home, heels clicking against the sidewalk, unsure if I was trembling from the chill or the weight of what just happened. Back in my apartment, I shut the door behind me and locked it out of habit. The space was dark except for the faint orange glow from the streetlights spilling through the blinds. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I just leaned back against the door and slid down to the floor. I replayed the entire night in my head, over and over like a broken cassette. Dorian's smirk, his words, the sound of that bill hitting the tray, the shame that rose in my chest like a flood. I thought about his voice when he said it. Not angry, not even sarcastic. Just matter of fact. Like he believed it with his whole heart. $5. That's your whole price tag. And then came the echo. Not his, but older, deeper, more permanent. "You'll never be the one people choose, Marisol. Don't expect too much. You're not like your sister. Let your brother handle that. He's the one going places." I closed my eyes and saw it all. The cramped living room in our childhood home. The crooked picture frames, the worn carpet with the burn mark from Dad's dropped cigarette. My mother cooing over my sister's grades. My father pulling my brother aside, handing him the keys to the old truck and saying, "Don't let your sister near it. She'll wreck it." And me? I was always just there. I did everything right. Stayed quiet, kept my grades up, didn't talk back, never asked for anything. But somehow that made me invisible. Like being low maintenance turned into being low value. I thought I had buried that part of myself, grown past it, proved them all wrong just by surviving. But tonight ripped open something I didn't know was still bleeding. I stood up, peeled off my coat, and walked to the kitchen, flipping on the small light over the sink. I opened my purse to grab a hair tie, and there it was, the $5 bill, crumpled, folded in half. I stared at it for a long time, not touching it, just letting it sit there like a ghost on the counter. That bill wasn't just about dinner. It was a symbol, a verdict, a reminder of every time I had let someone else assign my value, What scared me most was how easy it had been to believe it. I walked to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were puffy, mascara smudged. I looked like someone who didn't recognize her own reflection. I whispered, "You're not $5. Then louder, "You are not $5. It sounded stupid at first, like a bad line from a self-help podcast, but I needed to hear it out loud. I needed it to cut through the noise. I took the bill, unfolded it slowly, then set it flat on the table. Not as trash, not as proof, but as a marker, a reminder of what would never be allowed again. I stayed awake most of the night. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just thought and remembered, and slowly rebuilt. The sun peeked through my curtains around 6. I was still in yesterday's clothes. I sat at the edge of my bed, fingers tangled in the hem of my dress, when my phone buzzed. Dorian. "You embarrassed me last night. Don't do it again." That was it. No apology, no explanation, just control disguised as a reprimand. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply button. But before I could do anything, another buzz came through. Unknown number. "Coffee?" I sat frozen for a moment, then opened the message. No name, no signature. Just that one word. But somehow I already knew who it was. And for the first time in years, I had a choice. To keep shrinking or to answer someone who actually saw me. I stood in my kitchen a long time, holding my phone, staring at those two messages. Dorian's, cold, clipped, controlling. Alaric's, just one word. Coffee? But it carried something Dorian never had. Respect. I didn't answer either right away. I tucked the phone into the pocket of my cardigan and poured myself a glass of water. The tap creaked. The water was a little cloudy at first, the way it always was in this old building. Just another reminder of what I'd settled for. By the time the sun rose fully, I had made my decision. I replied, "Sure." Sunday mornings in downtown Chicago had their own rhythm. Slow, quiet, like the city was taking a breath after a long week. I chose the cafe Alaric had suggested, a small tucked-away spot with big windows, wood beams, and a chalkboard menu that hadn't changed in years. I got there 5 minutes early. That was my thing. Being early, being prepared, making sure no one ever had to wait on me. I picked a table near the back. My hands kept adjusting the hem of my sweater, then folding the napkin, then unfolding it again. I rehearsed lines in my head, how I'd play it cool, polite, surface level. How I'd make it clear that last night was just a moment, nothing more. But when he walked in, tall, unhurried with that stillness about him, all that rehearsing disappeared. He saw me immediately, nodded once, and joined me like we were just continuing a conversation, not starting one. He didn't mention Dorian, didn't ask about the dinner, didn't press for details. Instead, he asked, "What do you do, Marisol?" I blinked. "Work?" He smiled gently. "Yes, that thing we give the best hours of our lives to." I let out a soft laugh. "I'm an admin assistant. Midtown office, it's steady." He nodded. "Do you like it?" That question, not what do you do, but do you like it? "No," I said before I could edit myself. "But it pays the rent." He didn't fill the silence, just sipped his coffee and waited. I kept talking, maybe too much. I told him about how I had wanted to be a teacher once, how I loved literature, how I used to write poems in the margins of my notebooks, how somewhere between paying bills and making other people happy, those parts of me just faded. He listened, not the way people pretend to, nodding and checking their phones. No, Alaric listened like every word I said added a piece to the puzzle he was genuinely trying to understand. When I mentioned my family, I felt my throat tighten. "I always felt like the extra," I said. "My brother got all the attention from my dad. He was the one expected to carry the family name. My sister was the golden child. College, marriage, kids. And me? I was just there. The quiet one. The one who didn't need much. His eyes didn't leave mine. Invisible. I nodded slowly. He leaned back, his expression thoughtful. When someone strips you of your dignity, it doesn't stop there, he said, voice low. Next, they strip your voice, then your future. I stared at him. It hit too close, too sharp. Like he wasn't offering advice. He was holding up a mirror. He didn't say it with drama or pity, just truth, plain and heavy. I looked down at my coffee. My hands were warm around the mug, but my chest felt cold. I've always believed that staying quiet keeps the peace, I said softly. Maybe, he replied. But whose peace? That landed. I looked out the window, watching the people pass. Parents with strollers, a woman walking a dog, a couple holding hands. And for a moment, I wondered what it would feel like to live a life not constantly shaped by other people's moods. We finished our drinks. He didn't ask for my number, didn't offer his. Just left enough money to cover the check and said, "Take care of yourself, Marisol. The world won't do it for you." I stood up after him, a little unsteady, not from the coffee, but from the weight of things I hadn't let myself think in years. The sun was warmer now. The street outside buzzed softly with life. I stepped out of the cafe, and there he was, Dorian, leaning against the wall like he'd been waiting. His suit jacket was crisp. His smile wasn't. "Hey," he said, "we need to talk." I didn't move. He took a step closer. "And you're not going to like what I have to say." His tone wasn't angry. It was worse. It was calm. The look in his eyes told me this wasn't just about last night. It was about control. A line drawn in the sand, and I hadn't realized I was already standing on the wrong side of it. He didn't ask if he could walk me home. He just fell into step beside me like it was expected. The air between us was thick with things unspoken, the kind of silence that didn't comfort. It pressed down, like fog refusing to lift. I kept my eyes forward. The city was winding down for the night, restaurants dimming their lights, sidewalks slowly clearing. My boots clicked against the pavement, but his shoes made no sound. It was like he was trying to erase his presence, even as he hovered close. When we reached the steps of my apartment building, I paused. "Thanks for walking me," I said, keeping it flat, neutral. But he didn't stop. He moved past me, pushed the door open, and let himself in like he had a key to my life. I followed, not because I wanted to, but because I was stunned by how quickly it happened. Like I'd blinked, and suddenly he was in my space. Inside, the apartment felt smaller than usual. He walked ahead into the living room, stood there like he owned the air I breathed. "I've been patient," he began, his tone controlled but sharp around the edges. "But you embarrassed me last night, sitting there like a child, making me look bad." "I didn't say anything," I replied, voice low. "Exactly," he snapped. "You just sat there, letting everyone judge me, making me look like some jerk. And now I find out you're having coffee with some random guy the next morning." I blinked. "How do you—" "You think I don't know what's going on?" he cut in. "You were being watched, and now you're feeding the attention. Typical, playing victim, waiting for someone richer to come save you." I opened my mouth, then closed it. The words wouldn't come. My hands were trembling. "You should be grateful," he said, stepping closer. "Grateful someone like me even looked at you. You think there's a line of men dying to date a woman like you?" My chest tightened. The insult wasn't new, not really. It sounded a lot like things I'd heard growing up. In different words, sure, but same weight, same sharpness. The idea that I was lucky if anyone cared at all. "You keep pushing me," he continued, quieter now. "And I promise, No one else will want you when I'm done." He said it so casually, like it wasn't a threat, like it was just a fact. My ears rang. I stepped back, my heel hit the leg of the couch. He moved into the kitchen, opened my fridge like he had the right, pulled out a bottle of water. The clink of the door shutting felt louder than it should have. He turned back, leaned on the counter. "You're not listening to me," he said. "You never have. That's the problem." I looked down, and for a second, I almost did what I always do. Smooth things over. Make it. Okay, apologize just to stop the spiral. But then, like a thread pulling tight in my chest, I heard it again. "First they take your dignity, then your voice, then your future." Alaric's voice, quiet, measured, but unforgettable. I straightened. "Dorian," I said, carefully, calmly, "I need you to leave." He laughed, not loud, not mean, worse, dismissive. "You're serious?" I didn't answer, just stood there, heart pounding, throat dry. He walked toward the door slowly, shook his head. "You really think anyone else would want you?" he said, not even turning around. "You'll come crawling back." He left. The door slammed shut behind him. The sound echoed through the apartment long after he was gone. But his words, they didn't leave with him. They stayed, sank into the walls, clung to the silence. The apartment was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. The silence pressed against me like a second skin I couldn't peel off. Sleep hadn't come. My thoughts kept looping, over and over. His voice, his laugh, those words that now clung to the walls like mildew. I moved to the kitchen, barefoot, the tile floor cold under my feet. The morning light had started creeping in through the blinds, soft and gray, like the sky didn't want to wake up either. I filled the coffee pot and watched it drip, slow and steady, the only sound in the room. When I leaned against the counter, I caught my reflection in the window pane. It startled me. I looked older, not in the lines on my face, but in my eyes, like something inside had gone brittle. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, walked to the small kitchen table. My phone buzzed once on the counter, but I ignored it. I wasn't ready to let anyone in, not yet. I sat and opened my messages anyway, mostly junk, a few work notifications, and then, without really meaning to, I started scrolling through old conversations with Dorian. Texts where I'd said, "It's fine. I understand. Don't worry about it." Like I was rehearsing forgiveness before I'd even processed the pain. I kept reading until my chest tightened. There were so many little moments where I'd chosen peace over truth, silence over dignity. And then I saw it. A napkin. It was crumpled, stuffed in the corner of my purse. I must have shoved it there the night of the dinner. I pulled it out and smoothed it against the table. His handwriting, Dorian's smug scrawl, $5. Like it was a joke, a punchline. The napkin shook in my hands. Why had I kept it? Maybe because part of me needed the proof. That it wasn't in my head, that the shame I'd felt wasn't an overreaction. It was real, tangible. The phone buzzed again. I almost ignored it, but then I saw the name, Rosa, my sister. I hesitated before answering. "Hey," I said softly. "Morning," she chirped, too cheery. "I heard you had a situation." I stayed quiet. She didn't. "Dorian called me last night, said you had some kind of meltdown, in public, and that you've been acting unstable lately." I shut my eyes. That wasn't a surprise, just another rewrite of the truth. "He's worried about you," Rosa added. "He said you were spiraling." There was a pause on my end. I didn't know how to respond. "You always do this," she continued. "You make something small into this big emotional mess, and suddenly it's everyone else's fault." Her voice wasn't angry. It was worse, tired, disappointed, like she'd heard this story before and had stopped believing it. I swallowed hard. "You believe him." I didn't say that, she replied quickly, but the hesitation was already there. No, I said, quieter now. But you didn't ask what happened either. More silence. I have to go, Rosa said suddenly. Call me when you calm down. The line went dead. I stared at the screen, still glowing. My throat burned. The napkin was still in front of me. I reached for it again, not to throw it away, but to read it like a confession. Every loop of ink screaming what he thought of me. For a moment I let it in, all of it, the loneliness, the shame, the voice in my head that whispered, maybe they were right, maybe I was the problem. Then something shifted, not in the room, in me. I saw Alaric again, not in person, but in memory. The way he looked at me over that coffee cup, like I wasn't crazy, like I wasn't invisible. He hadn't offered pity, he'd offered presence. And for the first time in days, I let myself wonder if I'd been clinging to a version of myself shaped by everyone else's opinions. Maybe it was time I asked what I thought, what I believed. The napkin crinkled under my palm. I didn't throw it out, not yet, but I folded it carefully and slid it into the drawer. The story wasn't over, not theirs, not mine, not yet. The sky was soft with late afternoon light, that golden haze just before dusk, when everything feels quieter than it really is. I walked slowly through the park, hands buried in my coat pockets, my boots crunching the leaves that scattered across the path. The breeze carried the scent of dry earth and distant bonfires. Chicago in autumn had always reminded me of change, and now it felt like the season and I were finally in step. I'd made a choice the night before, not a loud one, not a declaration, just a quiet internal pivot, a shift in how I looked at myself. I wasn't going to be silent anymore, even if I didn't yet know exactly what that would mean. At one of the empty benches near the lake, I sat down and pulled the napkin from my coat pocket, the same one Dorian had left on the table. His handwriting still screamed off it like a slap. $5. I used to stare at it and feel shame, like that number had been branded into my skin. But now, I smoothed it out across my lap. It looked small, dumb, juvenile even. He thought it was a joke, a power move. But I was still here, still standing, still breathing. And that napkin was no longer proof of my humiliation. It was proof I'd survived it. I folded it once, then again, slow and neat, like I was tucking away an old wound. Not to forget it, but to honor what it taught me. Mind if I sit? I didn't have to look up to know it was Alaric. He always had this way of approaching without disrupting the air around him. He didn't fill a space, he fit into it. Sure, I said, scooting over slightly. I glanced at him. Dark coat, scarf loose around his neck, hands in his lap. He wasn't looking at me like he expected anything. Not a story, not gratitude, not tears. We sat in silence for a few minutes, just listening to the wind, the distant sounds of kids playing near the swings. Then quietly, he said, I was there. I saw everything. I looked over at him. His face didn't carry pity, just knowing. You don't have to pretend anymore. That did something to me. Hearing it out loud, not as a question, not as concern, but a fact. Like he wasn't giving me permission, just reminding me of something I'd forgotten. I didn't say thank you. That didn't feel right. Instead, I nodded. I'm tired of performing, for everyone, for family, for him. He turned his head slightly, waiting, listening. I used to think I just wanted someone to protect me, I admitted. But now I think, maybe I just want someone who doesn't need me to disappear to feel strong. He didn't speak. And that was the gift. He didn't fill the space with cliches. He let me take up the room I needed. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I ignored it. It buzzed again. I sighed, pulled it out, and the screen made my stomach lurch. It was a photo. Me, from what looked like months ago, bent slightly at the waist, hand reaching toward Dorian, probably in the middle of some forgotten moment. But he'd captioned it, "This is what desperation looks like," posted publicly. People were already reacting. Comments, laugh emojis, snide replies. My heart raced, but not from panic. Not this time. I wasn't humiliated, I was livid. Not the kind of hot, explosive anger that makes you scream, but the cold, focused kind that sharpens your thoughts. I showed the phone to Alaric. He looked at it, then back at me. "Is that real?" he asked. I nodded. "It's me, but it's not the truth." And then I looked out across the water, the light turning more amber now. "He thinks I'll just take it, that I'll roll over, that I'll go quiet again." "And will you?" Alaric asked gently. I shook my head. "I've been quiet too long. He thinks I'll never fight back." I turned to face him fully. My voice didn't shake. "He's wrong." Alaric didn't smile. He didn't nod dramatically. He just said, "Good." And for the first time in a long time, I felt steady. I stood up, the folded napkin still tucked in my coat pocket. The wind picked up a little, tugging at my scarf as I started walking again. The real battle wasn't about love anymore. It was about truth. And I was ready to bring mine into the light. I didn't sleep much the night before, but I wasn't tired. Not in the usual sense. My body moved on instinct as I dressed, brushed my hair, and packed a bottle of wine I knew Rosa liked. A peace offering? Maybe. Or maybe I just needed to feel like I still belonged somewhere. The ride to my sister's house was quiet, the kind of silence that hums behind your ears when you're bracing for impact. The suburbs looked unchanged. Manicured lawns, pumpkins on porches, kids on scooters. But inside me, everything was different now. Rosa greeted me at the door with a forced smile, her arms just barely wrapping around my shoulders. "Glad you made it," she said, like she was checking a box. Inside, the usual chaos of a family dinner unfolded. Kids running between legs, someone yelling about the potatoes, the clatter of dishes, football humming from the living room. But there was tension, too. The kind that lingered behind smiles too wide. Behind every, "How have you been?" that didn't wait for an answer. I noticed the way our cousin Clara gave me that quick up-down glance. The way Uncle Jorge avoided eye contact. Whispers swirled behind napkins. And all I did was nod, smile softly, and watch. I didn't defend myself. Not yet. I sat at the end of the table, near the window where I could see the street. And that's when I saw him pull up. Dorian. Wearing that same smug confidence, like nothing had happened. I froze, wine glass halfway to my lips. Rosa opened the door for him like she'd been expecting it. Of course she had. He swept in like a politician, shaking hands, laughing too loud. "Hey, everyone. Sorry I'm late. You know how work gets." He winked at me like we shared a secret. My throat tightened, but I didn't speak. Dinner was served, and the noise picked up. Forks scraping plates, kids giggling, stories being told too loudly. For a moment, I let the clamor cover me like armor. Then Dorian raised his glass. "I've got a funny one," he announced, grinning at the table. "So, Marisol and I went out to this fancy spot last week, right? The kind where the waiter acts like you're lucky he even looked at you." He paused for effect. "And the bill comes out, $150, no joke. And she looks at me like I'm crazy. So I pull out a $5, slide it across the tray, and say, 'That's all you're worth, sweetheart.'" Laughter erupted. Hesitant, awkward at first, then more freely from a few of them. Rosa chuckled like she was watching a sitcom rerun. My hands trembled under the table. He added, "And you know what she did? She just sat there, like she agreed." That's when I reached into my purse. I unfolded the napkin, slowly, deliberately, laid it on the table like a weapon. The room quieted. Forks stopped midair. "That's not a story," I said calmly, not looking at Dorian. That's the receipt. He laughed, but it cracked at the edges. Oh, come on, Mari. Don't be dramatic. It was a joke. No, I said, louder this time. What you did wasn't a joke. It was small, cruel, and real. Rosa frowned, setting down her glass. Do we really have to do this now? Dorian smirked, playing innocent. Exactly. We're family. No need to make a scene. But before I could answer, a quiet voice from the other end of the table spoke up. It was Dad. I saw the bank statements, he said, not raising his eyes from his plate. I know who's been covering the mortgage these past months. It wasn't Rosa. It wasn't Dorian. It was Marisol. Silence. Even the kids stopped moving. Rosa's face twisted. Why would you go digging through that? Dad finally looked up. His voice was calm, but firm. Because I was tired of believing lies. Something broke open in the room. Rosa stood up. So now I'm the villain? Because she plays the victim better than anyone I've ever seen? I'm not playing anything, I said, my voice steady now. I've just been quiet too long. The table split down in visible lines, aunts muttering, cousins shifting in their seats. Dorian stood too, jaw clenched. You think this proves something? You think anyone's going to take your side after all this? And that's when I saw it, in his eyes. Fear, not panic, not rage, but the fear of a man who knew control was slipping. I leaned in just slightly. This isn't over, I whispered, but it will be soon. He didn't respond, just stormed out, the screen door slamming behind him. Rosa sat down slowly as if all the air had left the room. I picked up the napkin again, folded it, and tucked it away. I thought exposing the truth would end it, but Dorian wasn't finished, and his last move was the cruelest of all. After the family dinner shattered like glass around me, I thought, maybe, that would be the end. That truth would be enough. That exposure would force Dorian to finally back off. But I should have known better. 3 days later, I came home from work, a new tutoring job at a local adult ed center, and found an envelope slipped under my apartment door. No stamp, no return address, just my name written in cold block letters. Inside, photocopies, legal forms, account statements. One page had the words, "Theft, investigation request" in bold red ink, and scrawled along the bottom in blue pen in handwriting I knew too well. Let's see if your new friends think you're still the hero. He was accusing me of stealing from him, not just lying, weaponizing the very transfers I'd made to cover his bills, using my own kindness as a noose. My hands went cold, but only for a moment, because I didn't crumble. I sat down at my little kitchen table, the one with the chipped edge and the mismatched chairs, and I opened my laptop. Everything I needed was there. Every Venmo transfer, every rent receipt, every wire sent from my account with notes like your car, your mom's meds, your tuition. I organized them into folders, dated and labeled. The napkin, it was framed now sitting on my bookshelf, a reminder. 2 days later, I stood on the steps of the downtown courthouse. The sky was gray, the kind that threatened rain but never followed through. I wore a navy blouse I'd bought from a thrift store for $5. The irony made me smile. Dorian was already there. Of course he was. He leaned against the railing, arms crossed, sunglasses on like he was shielding himself from accountability. As I walked up, he smirked. This is where it all falls apart for you. I didn't stop. I didn't respond. Inside, the courtroom was quiet. Just a few chairs occupied. A clerk, a judge, Dorian's smug attorney. He laid out his story like a movie script. She manipulated me, he said, used me for financial gain, abused access to my accounts. He even handed over a forged document, my confession. I almost laughed. The signature wasn't even close. When the judge turned to me, I didn't waste a breath. I opened my folder, slid over the receipts, pointed to each one by one. This is from my account. That's my note, in my writing. That transfer, made after his card declined twice. And this, I pulled out a high-res scan of the infamous napkin. This isn't a joke. It's evidence of control. The judge leaned back, silent for a moment. Then she looked over the forged page, compared it to my ID. This doesn't match, she said flatly. Dorian shifted in his seat. His lawyer cleared his throat. Ms. Alvarez, the judge said to me, thank you for your clarity and documentation. She turned back to Dorian. As for you, you may want to seek counsel regarding these forgeries. Just like that, the tables flipped. I watched Dorian's expression unravel in real time. The confidence drain from his face, the smirk die on his lips. When it was over, I stepped back outside into the thick city air. Alaric was waiting across the street, leaning on the hood of his car. He didn't wave, just gave me a nod. I crossed over slowly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled something out. It was the napkin, the original. I saw it fall from your bag after that family dinner, he said. Didn't think you'd want it back, until now. I took it from him, holding it with both hands. I don't hate it anymore, I said quietly. It used to feel like proof that I was worthless. Now, it's proof I survived. He didn't say anything, just watched me. And somehow, that said more. Later that evening, I opened the door to my new apartment. It was small. One bedroom, barely enough space for the couch and the desk. But it was mine, paid for with my work, furnished with what I'd chosen. I set the framed napkin on the windowsill, and for the first time, I exhaled without fear catching in my throat. I wasn't waiting to be rescued. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was done surviving. I was living. I whispered it to myself just once. I'm more than their stories. I finally wrote my own. And maybe one day, I'll tell you what happened after the door closed. But for now, all you need to know is, I never let $5 define me again.